Go ahead and call the meeting to order. Sue, roll call please.
Ms. Banks,
Yes.
Mr. Arnold,
Here.
Ms. Bell,
Here.
Mr. Brown,
Here.
Ms. Carter, Ms. Clark, Ms. Friedman,
Here.
Reverend Gordon,
Here.
Ms. Harding. Here. Ms. Mendoza-Locke, Mr. Knowles,
Here.
Mr. O'Connor, Ms. Rodriguez. Here. Dr. Russell,
Here.
Mr. Stengel, Major White, Ms. White.
Okay, thank you. All right, recognition of visitors. Richard, did you want to start?
Lenny, go ahead.
Mike Francie, CJCC.
Tina Lason.
Kirkemeyer, board staff.
Paul Luke, Recovery Council, and Board of Trustee, St. Paul Community Center.
Michael Carter, board staff.
Latrice Flowers, board staff. Rachel Freeman, Zeff Center.
Adam Nutt, Zeff Center.
All right, welcome everyone. All right, the next item on the agenda are the minutes from our April 4th meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Okay, any questions? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining? All right, motion passes. All right, number 5, Jenny.
The financial statements for the month of March start on page 6. The big thing in the month of March was the second half of our levy revenue that we got in March. I keep saying March. We actually came in very close to what we budgeted so far on a fiscal year-to-date basis. I was gonna round up to 100%, but it's actually, we're at 99.5% of our budget on a fiscal year-to-date basis. And a little sneak peek in April, we got the rollback piece, the extra $1 million that we get. And so, as of right now, we are looking at our annual revenue for levy being very, very close to our annual budget. Like, we are literally at like 18,608,000 something. So we're going to be very close to that at the end of the fiscal year. In the federal revenue line, same as I've been repeating for the last several months, we're under budget there for the SOAR sauce. Some of that is true underspending from last federal fiscal year that ended in September. Some of it is underspending for the current fiscal year that started in October, mostly because of delays in the state process, and we're just now seeing some significant payments finally rolling out, and then once the payments roll out, we have to request the funds from Ohio Moss, so there's a little bit of delay in that. In the state revenue line, we are under budget there because of, again, like I've been saying the last several months, the access to wellness funds, which were previously called multi-system adult, you've heard me say that, and the addiction treatment program funds. Then if you look in the expenditures line, the grant funded program expenses, that 2.6 million that we're under budget there, a majority of that is attributable to the SOAR sauce underspending and the access to wellness and ATP underspending that I mentioned before. So for the month of March, we had an increase in net assets of 5.3 million, which was due to receiving our levy revenue that was partially offset by our March grant payments that went out. On the balance sheet on page 7, not a whole lot of activity. Most of the activity was in cash and pretty much levy revenue offset by grant payments that went out and our other normal expenses. Our non-designated board fund balance at the end of March was 19.3 million. And the payments for March are on pages 8 through 10, and there is a motion on page 5.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining? All right, motion passes. Number 6, Jenny.
The next section is the fiscal year 24 allocations by agency. The write-up for it starts on page 11. The actual agency allocations start on page 13. So you might recall in April, I brought to you the preliminary allocations by agency. So this, I will say, I might be a little bit biased because this is my area, but I will say this is probably the most important thing you're going to approve all fiscal year. If you looked at the motions, if you took a sneak peek, it's $19.5 million in the motions. This is our agency allocations for next fiscal year. That starts in July. So if we have any new board members, most of the new ones are not here, but this is the main agency agreement allocations for the next year. So this work started back in December. We met as board staff to go through what we wanted to, what our priorities were. We sent out applications to our agencies for funding. We discussed internally. We put out 120-day notices for the funding, and we have been meeting continuously, and the result is before you on pages 13 through 16. So I'm going to kind of run through the proposed allocations. They're in separate sections, and then I'm going to stop and ask if there are questions. So on pages 13 and 14, this is what you've seen before. This is what you saw in April. There are only a few minor changes. I mentioned in April that some of the agencies, we were still working on with them if they wanted the 2% increase because there were questions on the funding workbook. That has all been addressed, and so there are only minor changes on those 2 pages. Are there any questions on that? So you first see fiscal year 23 allocations and then fiscal year 24 proposed allocations. Okay, then I'm going to move on to the next section, which is the top of page 15, which we call by a couple different names. We call non-certified agency allocations. We also call them board-directed allocations because some of them are driven by internal spending. So these, I'm going to go over a couple of them that have things for you to know. One of them being the Guardianship Services Board allocation. You might remember back in January, we approved for them an allocation for actually a full calendar year. So you actually approved an allocation through December 31st of 2023. So that is noted there for them. So their amount is a fiscal year amount, but you actually already approved through December 31st.
Okay.
Then there are several other lines noted where they requested a 2% increase, and we are proposing that for funding. Then in the lines that are driven by MHRSB, there is a line called Mental Wellness Community Grants. This was previously mini grants. We are proposing to change the name of those because we think Mental Wellness Community Grants, although it is a bit of a mouthful, is much more fitting for what they are.
I agree. I like it.
On the next line, sorry, I'm gonna continue to take drinks because I don't want the same thing to happen this month that happened last month. On the next line for health equity, you'll notice there that we have proposed a decrease in the health equity. I want to be clear that health equity is still a strategic priority for us. So in no way, shape, or form are we saying that we want to decrease our health equity efforts. we are actually proposing to move some of the funds. If you notice down below in the communications and advertising line and the community engagement line, there are increases in both of those lines. We also have an increase in one of our administrative budget lines, in the advertising line and administrative budget. So what we've been finding is that we are actually doing a pretty good job of incorporating health equity into a lot of our activities. And when you do that, you end up with expenses that could hit multiple lines. It could hit health equity, or it could hit where the true expense lies, which in this case could be communications, it could be community engagement. But we're finding that the purpose of our health equity efforts is to incorporate them into what we're doing.
Right, and getting
And
the
that's what
message-
we're doing.
Getting the message to the people we want to reach.
So we have been incorporating those
Okay.
into what we're doing. And so we're proposing to decrease the health equity funds, but by increasing those other lines to incorporate the use of those funds.
Makes complete sense.
You will also notice there that community engagement has a note next to it that it was in the administrative budget in fiscal year '23. So we are proposing to move that out of our administrative budget and into this section. We think it just makes more sense because it's more project-based and less of an administrative, an executive type function. By that same token, when I said earlier some health equity funds moving to the administrative budget, you'll see when I get to the administrative budget, it's the reverse. So some of the things that we were doing, we think are more of an administrative function and belong in the administrative budget. And then you'll see there we do have some decreases in some other lines, the peer support training and workforce development lines. Mostly just because of the last several years we've seen a trend of underspending. And if you might recall when we when we put out our financial forecast in February, we told you that without changing anything, we would anticipate that by fiscal year '26, some decreases in funding would be necessary. So we're taking some steps now, some minimal steps now to try to head that off a little bit, the best way that we know how. In a way that we're taking the hit before forcing the community to take the hit on some of this. So you will see then in the total non-certified agency allocation section, there is an overall decrease, mostly for some of the changes that we've made, along with us knowing that we can make some minimal changes now in hopes that it pays off in the long run with less changes, with less reductions in the future. You will recall though, I do want to point out that several of these line items were in our strategic plan, specifically workforce development, communications, community engagement, and health equity. So there was an additional $250,000 in our financial forecast set aside for strategic planning efforts. That is not included in this. So this would be our base allocation, our normal spending. Any additional spending related to the strategic plan would be brought before you at a different time. But the funds were in our financial forecast to be able to include that later.
Okay, that's it.
I'm going to stop there and see if there are any questions.
Jenny, workforce development, can you refresh as to what that is and the elements of that workforce development?
So I think the intent of that is for workforce development for our agencies, and helping, Scott, help me out a little bit on this, because it's been a while since we've had significant spending there.
supporting overall trainings, and, you know, with the addition of the workforce development within our strategic planning process, and now we have access to the $250,000 that was in the forecast. Plus, there's a substantial amount of money within the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services for workforce development. We felt we could take a little bit of a reduction locally and use some of the alternative funds.
So that would take, does the staff have like CEUs?
CEUs, but, you know, for licensed staff, you know, for the agencies, that's very important for their well-being. But that isn't the main way they get their training through us. There's a lot of different mechanisms for that to occur. For our staff, we have about, I don't know, maybe four or five people that are actually licensed now. And so, yeah, that way include that, but others, we want to make sure everybody has equitable access to training. So no matter where you are, who you are, you get some training somewhere.
Thank you.
What are pooled funds under family council?
Good question. So historically, and when I say that, before me, there has been a group of community funded organizations, ourselves, Toledo Public Schools, Lucas County Juvenile Court, the Lucas County Board of Developmental Disabilities, and I'm forgetting somebody. We put in money to essentially a pooled fund for some of the most acute youth in our community. It funds a lot of case coordination activities at family council, residential services, respite care for the families. It's a way for our community to say, actually to stop saying, oh no, that's your kid, not our kid, and we just take it out of the pool funds.
And who's all part of that, for those pool funds? All the agencies you just mentioned?
Yeah, all the agencies contribute to that, some more than others.
Is this our contribution or?
Yeah, this is
Yes.
just our contribution, yes.
So we don't collect for everybody? in
No.
the-
No. And then anyone in our community can actually make a referral into that. And then the Ohio Family Council actually establishes the eligibility criteria. There's a pool fund group that meets on a routine and regular basis, consisting of myself, child support, CSB, that was the other
Child
one.
support.
Yeah. Juvenile court, and Toledo Public Schools and United Way, that governs the pool. So we meet outside of our duties on executive council of family council, because we're all mandated members as well.
All makes sense. It might, just for purposes of clarity, you know, it might be better to call it coordination of juvenile services or something. I mean, that's what it's for,
Yeah.
whatever it's for, you know.
Yeah,
It's a historical artifact.
yeah. Everybody knows it is pool funds.
Well, I didn't.
Which is an oversight, because it's always been in there, right? So we should have had
Yeah, no,
a
I
better
think it's the
descriptor
same
of
as
that.
last year, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't talk about it.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Is that money used all the time?
If it isn't used, it's carried over from year to year, and then the amounts that are billed to each of our agencies are negotiated within the group, so that we have a certain amount available
For each organization?
in the pool itself. Yeah.
How does this pool get access?
Referral to family council through their case coordination.
Perfect.
Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next section, the middle of page 15. is additional Ohio Moss allocations. So this one I did mention last month as well. These are allocations that are Ohio Moss funds, but we get discretion in how we want to spend the money. Typically, these are the agencies that they have gone to and for this purpose. We did provide a 120-day notice to the agencies, so you can see in the fiscal year 24 column, they are all $0 amounts. When Ohio Moss allocations come out and we know those amounts, should we decide that we want to fund these programs again, it will come back before you for approval. Then the last section that starts on the bottom of page 15 and goes into page 16 is information only. These are true pass-through allocations. So Ohio Moss does not give us any discretion in this. They say this is your amount, and this is who it is to go to. And in our authorization for expenditures policy, you do not have to approve them. And there is one error in that, and that would be Zeph's gambling. The very last line of that should be $75,000 in fiscal year 23 allocation. But it's information only, so it's just for your information. The only one of those that we know the fiscal year 24 amount is NPI's PATH program at $162,017. So there are 3 separate motions due to conflicts of interest that are on pages 11 and 12. So the first one is the allocation for tasks funds. The next motion is for the Thomas M. Warner Center, and then the last motion is for everything else.
All right, we do have to take each one separately. So for the first motion, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any other questions about that one?
And just for the record, that's the task motion.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining?
Abstain.
Okay, motion passes. All right, the next one, and that is the one to the Warrant Center. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining?
Abstain.
All right, and the final one for everything else?
So moved.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining? Okay, motion passes. All right, so the next one is still Jen.
This is a biggie.
This next one is on page 17, the fiscal year 24 subsidy schedule. This gets included in the fiscal year 24 provider contract that go to our agencies. So essentially, you can see at the bottom of page 17, for those of you that aren't familiar, co-pays are set for the services that are listed at the bottom of page 17. And then on the schedule listed in the middle of the page, based on the HHS poverty guidelines that are updated every year, the copay dollar amounts are set. And this gets loaded into GOSH, our payment system. So the agencies then know what is to be charged to the individual that goes in for treatment. There is, this is consistent with what we've had every year. It's just updated in the poverty guidelines from 23, or from 22 to 23. The only change in this from last year is in the level H hardship column, which is on the far right. So the hardship was set in fiscal year 20. We added that as a way for our agencies to provide service to individuals that might be just outside of our income guidelines, but they still wanted to be able to serve them. And in the past, when we first had this, we had it set at 5% of their POS allocation. And we've seen that some of our agencies have been going past that. And we have been allowing it because they have not been exceeding their total POS allocations. And so for fiscal year 24, we would like to set it at 10% of their allocation. With the knowledge that they're not getting additional funds, increases in POS are not going to be automatic. But it gives the agencies a little bit more flexibility in providing care, because this is up to their discretion in how they want to use this hardship column. If they want to provide the service or if they want to.
And POS stands for?
Oh, purchase of service. So that would be the treatment. I'm sorry. That would be all of our treatment. So an individual who goes into one of our agencies for treatment.
So when you say discretion, it's at their discretion, so how is that, that doesn't seem like a very fair, like who makes that decision on who they treat if they're beyond this hardship percentage? Does that make sense to you? Like, if it's
Well,
at their discretion, it feels like that would be.
Like, who's making that final decision?
Yeah.
It's their decision to make, folks.
Okay.
They run the agencies, we don't run agencies. We provide them the opportunity to provide additional care to people who we would normally not fund services to. Some people might come in just on the border, they might have private insurance maybe that doesn't cover certain things. What we want is, this is accessible for folks who walk in the door so they don't have to be turned away elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I'm very comfortable with our agencies serving people, as they walk in the door. I don't think it's looked at as, oh, well, it's our discretion, we're not going to take you.
Okay.
It's a way of bringing people into the organization, not excluding them. Because previously, they would have been turned away.
Yeah, I mean, there's a gap there, and some people are off by like $100, they make $100 too much a month, and then they're denied. So I appreciate that.
There is a motion at the top-ish of page 17 for approval.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining? Motion passes. All right. And I think, is it Amy one more time?
One more time.
One more
It is.
time. Or Jenny, I should say, I'm sorry.
All right, this is the fiscal year 24 administrative budget on page 19. I'm just going to go over some of the highlights for you for the fiscal year budget. So if you look at the table, in the first column, we have the fiscal year 23 approved budget, and then we have a column of expenses through March 31st. And then the next column is the proposed budget for fiscal year 24, and then the last column would be the change in the 2 years. The salaries amount is based on 23 FTE, so our new organization chart, assuming full-time, all positions are filled as of July 1st. And then the only other significant change then in the personnel section is the contractual employment, which in fiscal year 23, you might remember at the beginning of fiscal year 23, we brought in a contractor for the finance department to help us out, help us bridge the gap until we were able to hire someone. Then in the non-personnel section, the rent has a significant increase. Obviously, we're going to be moving. That is somewhat of an estimate, but somewhat of a pretty good guess based on what we know of the cost so far, with an estimated move of November. Should there be any changes that we would need to come back to you for, we would obviously come back to you. In the equipment and software line, the decrease there is because fiscal year '23, we had an increase due to additional staffing in the new organization chart. So we knew with additional staffing,
Okay.
we would need additional equipment. We're bringing that back down to previous levels. There are several lines that just have minimal increases: dues, telephone, liability insurance, staff parking. That's just due to normal vendor increases that we would see. The community engagement line, as I said before, has been moved to the board directed section. So you'll see a 0 there in the fiscal year '24 budget. The travel line has an increase. The travel line, we've been hit with quite a few different things. So we have additional employees, we've seen a lot more in-person meetings, and we've seen the cost of travel increase. The mileage rates have gone up, so we've seen an increased need for a higher budget there. And then on the marketing line down below, so that line was previously called advertising and printing. We are proposing to change it to marketing because we think it's more fitting of the expenses that are included in that line. And that is the line that I was referring to back when I was talking about the board directed expenses, that we are moving some of those expenses to this. And most of that would be some of the work that Credio is doing for us that initially maybe was health equity related. Specifically like our website, they maybe were initially doing some health equity work to make it more accessible. Well, now it's upkeep. Now it's clearly belongs here. So it makes a lot more sense to move some of those expenses into this section. Moving down the line, professional services miscellaneous. I know there's a lot of abbreviations there, but went from 102,814 to 0. That in fiscal year '23 was RAMA for the strategic plan and Ascend for the ITP, neither of which are budgeted in fiscal year '24. The legal fees will be a separate motion as needed. The ITP project expenses will be a separate motion when it is ready to be presented. And then there are a couple things that are not included, obviously the legal fees and the ITP phase 2, but also the renovation and relocation costs for the new our new location. So if you factor out the renovation and relocation costs and the ITP phase 2 costs, our budget for fiscal year '24 is actually $57,000 less than what our forecast was. And that is mostly due to rent. Our forecast was an increase in rent for the entire fiscal year, and this has the increase in rent starting in November. And then a few other minor differences, but I am happy to answer any questions. There is a motion at the top of page 19 to approve the budget, and as a reminder, our budgets would be set for each individual line. So it's a total of $2,563,589, but we are set to each individual line item in the budget.
And then if there are variances in the different line items, is the budget going to come back to the board then to move those dollars around?
In our policy, we are permitted to be 5% or 5,000 or 10%, I'm sorry, over the line. So if we think that we might be more than that, we will come back to you.
And then you mentioned the renovations and the relocation is not
included, correct.
in here. So when
Correct.
it comes time for those, or
Those will definitely be coming back separate. Yep.
coming back to the separate.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any additional questions? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining? All right, motion passes. All right, Scott?
Well, that concludes the Jenny Huffman show.
Jenny, you did a great
Good
job.
show, yeah.
You covered a lot of territory in a short period of time.
One is syndication.
Okay, let's talk City of Toledo American Rescue Plan Act funds. Draw your attention to page 20. We talked about this at our last Planning and Oversight Committee meeting. I presented the plan. I talked to you about how the plan had been developed with collaboration between the mayor's office and several city council members. And a lot of the information that we heard in the community about what is needed in addressing the violence as it pertains to the impact from COVID in particular. We, just actions related to that, we've presented at the Agenda Review Committee the following week after this first presentation. And then the week after that, there was a whole group of us that not only presented, but there was quite a bit of advocacy on behalf of the proposed plan. There was about, I think it was maybe 8 different presentations from community members regarding support for this plan. It was passed through the Health and Access Committee that night, and then it went to full council the day after and ended up being approved. So where we're at now is just like any of these large dollar things, you kind of do like a soft application. Okay, how are we? What are we proposing to do? How are we? Kind of get the paperwork rolling. Then you get approval, and then they come back and they say, okay, we need this whole book filled out.
And it's a book.
And it is a book. It is literally so that's where we're at now, is we met with legal department and finance at City of Toledo, and Jenny is leading the creation of the actual, what they call, application. So I think about this as the funds have been designated, we need to apply so they get approved. So I want you to think about that concept a little bit, because it's going to come back in the next agenda item as well. So our plan and our commitment to the City of Toledo was that we would rapidly move these projects forward as we could. So we're staging them in a couple of different buckets. The first bucket is for, and the main priority of the ARPA funding was to get funds out to get those mental wellness community grants out immediately. And so the wellness grants are a match between $5,000 of what we used to call our mini grants and $15,000 in City of Toledo ARPA funds. Well, our commitment to move those grants forward rapidly, we want to run a third mini grant, community mental wellness, it is a mouthful, isn't it, process this fiscal year. Well, you only budgeted 2 rounds. So we need, and we will be asking you to allocate an additional $50,000 out of health equity funds for the purposes of us running this third round of mini grants before the end of the fiscal year. So the reason is
Fiscal year 23, I mean 24?
fiscal year 23,
23.
by the end of June.
Wow, we gotta move quick.
And we are ready to move quick.
Okay.
And here's the reason why. If we put it off till next year, we're gonna miss the whole summer.
Good point.
And we don't wanna miss the summer if these grants are gonna target mental wellness with an eye on reducing violence in our community. So strategically, we want to get this money out into the community. And a lot of the services and organizations that would apply for this would be organizations that very likely would qualify for health equity funds if we so chose to use them that way. And in fact, will be targeted for a lot of those organizations. Now, we don't know who will apply, but Michael is ready to push the button and send it out to the community as soon as we get approval. So we're talking about a 3-week process, essentially. We're going to, with the signal that you give us today that you're approving it, we're going to press the button, and then we're going to get that out into the community, and then 3 weeks later, after you final approval, we're going to meet and decide the 10 organizations to get the $20,000. Now, you'll see in our motion that I'm asking for the approval to execute those contracts now. And then we'll come back and tell you who actually got them. Because otherwise, we won't have the timing lined up between our board meetings and the responses. We anticipate a lot of responses because of the increase in 20,000. And we're prepared to deal with that. And we now have a better understanding of what the requirements around reporting ARPA are. And those are being integrated into the application and outcome process and all that, as well as we talked last month. Yes,
You
ma'am.
said 10 organizations?
10 organizations, yes. Yes.
And you're confident the ARPA funds will be available by whatever?
Yes, yeah. We really, we clearly won't execute the contracts if there's a hiccup somewhere. I mean, we won't be able to sign the contract, but we want to have it all in place for us to be able to execute that contract. So there seems to be a question of math.
I got it.
Okay.
She was trying to figure out how much each organization would get and
Okay.
and everything.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
She already had it figured out.
So that's one we want to rapidly do. We also know that due to COVID, there's an increase in domestic violence, not just adults, but children. And Family and Child Abuse Prevention Center serves a lot of those children. And we would normally be considering an increase for their POS about this time of year as well. And so we can rapidly move the money and make that available to them. We will be asking you for a 14-month contract in addition to what you've already approved in your purchasing plan. And then, of course, our favorite conversation to be had and exciting is we are moving forward with our Latinx-based prevention navigation services. The meetings that we're having with Sophia Quintero and the Believe Center are going well. We just had a nice meeting last week. We expect them to have their responses to our RFI at the end of May. But in the meantime, we want to keep this process moving. We've added Nuestra Gente to the process. They are currently providing services. We want them to provide navigation services, so you'll see a motion for them to begin to provide services. Now, obviously, we will go to them and ask them for, to provide us a definitive on what they will be providing, what the outcomes will, how it matches with our strategic framework. We'll connect all those things into this process, and they will actually be able to start services very rapidly, since they're really the only organization in that community providing that level of bilingual, bicultural services at this time. So that's very good news for us to kind of launch that service, because if you recall, it has been now 15 to 16 months since services have been provided in the Latinx community, and it's high time we get services back there. So that leaves 3 services that we still need to develop a strategy for, and our plan would be to come back to you in June with that strategy. Mental wellness rapid response team, the trauma and grief support group capacity building, and then of course you all are familiar with Danny's Place. That doesn't take much of a strategy. Put shovels in the ground and then we can use that to pay for the capital.
I noticed you didn't have any for this fiscal year.
Yeah, because we won't have our construction this fiscal year.
Got it.
So,
Okay, I just wanted
yeah.
to make sure I understood
Yeah.
that that's the case.
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you for that clarification. So what you have in front of you is 6 motions. They can all be taken together if you so choose. But I want to make sure you're aware of what the first motion says in particular.
Yeah.
Authorizes the executive directors to submit the City of Toledo final application packet. So remember I said we do that preliminary application and we come back. So we're working on that. And that language is very specific because it is in ARPA guidelines that you present a motion to that, with that language. For $2 million of American Rescue Plan funds, assure that the MHRSB meets the conditions for accepting the ARPA funds, which we do. Toledo Legal has already weighed in on it, that we do. And then you and authorizes its executive director enter into contracts to accept the $2 million in the City of Toledo, in City of Toledo ARPA funds if awarded. So that if awarded is what I wanted to draw your attention to, because you'll see that, to David's point, what happens if we don't get those in each of these.
I was wondering.
Yeah, it's really, what's that?
I was wondering about that with
Yeah.
everything that's happening.
Right, it's that, just that whole timing issue. So you're pre-approving the resolutions under the context that when they're awarded, we can move forward. And all these awards say that, upon award, upon award, upon award, so that we can rapidly move and we want to get this money flowing. So then, each of the organizations that are identified, you can see, when we don't know, like the mental wellness grants are identified. That gives me the authority to run the RFP as we do, and then allocate those, or to enter into those contracts, and then we'll come back and report. And then the others are Family and Child Abuse Prevention Center, Sophia Quintero, Nuestra Gente, and the Believe Center. Not in that order, with the dollar amounts that match back to your table here for the first 14 months. So I will stop there and be happy to answer any questions.
So when it comes to the 2025 budget, would that come back to be built into the overall budget we would approve?
So that's the thinking right now.
Okay.
But we checked with the City of Toledo, and let's say funds are drawn down faster than, let's say Danny's Place.
Right.
Funds are drawn down faster than what we had anticipated. We're not necessarily tied to that time frame that's written
Okay,
here.
okay.
We're
You
tied
answered
to
my
the
question.
entire time frame, not the individual years.
Okay.
And of course, though, when we make these changes, if we were to make those changes, the City of Toledo asked to get the courtesy of letting them know that we're making those subtle changes.
Okay, all right, so, okay.
So the motion is for, even though it says through June 30th of 24, the funding will be through June of 25.
No. I'm only asking for allocations through June of '24. If there were changes to the amounts, like if we were going to add amounts in or extend timeframe, that would always come back to the board.
Okay. And then the other question would be, again, I'm seeing startup and operational expenses, like for Believe, so sustainability beyond that period.
So sustainability, the vision for sustainability beyond the period is board funding through that RFI process that we've been trying to initiate. Yes, ma'am.
So the $50,000 for the what's it called, the mental
Mental
wellness
wellness
community
community.
grants.
Yes.
As we receive applications for those, that programming will specifically take place over this upcoming summer.
That is the idea, yes. So, it really depends on what they submit their budget to look like,
Okay.
right? So, our vision is to run 5 successive cycles, starting with the first cycle here. And then we would normally run another cycle starting in July, and then we'd run one in January, and then July and January.
Right.
So it really depends on what they're asking for, the timing of it. It isn't necessarily specifically for the summer, but our hope is that it will be used for during the summer activities.
Okay. This is what I'm confused about. If it's not going to be used during the summer, for summer activities, why would they be drawing down $50,000 now?
Who's drawing down
Any,
50,000?
why are we funding the, okay, I thought I understood, obviously I'm very confused here. I thought I understood you to say that you are seeking the additional $50,000 allocation to help bridge the time between now and the startup for this.
Not bridge, not bridge. So when you approved the fiscal year #23 allocation for community mini grants, it was $100,000.
Right,
$50,000 for cycle 1, $50,000 for cycle 2.
right,
We ran both of those.
right,
That money's gone.
right.
We want to run another cycle. So we don't have any money to match for this next cycle. So we're putting 50,000 in the pool to bring city council
Yeah.
15,000 or
50,
150,000.
okay. Okay, so this is what
Yeah.
I'm confused about. Given what you just said, that we are covering this third.
Our 5,000 of the 20,000.
Right. But by the same token, the people applying for the grants don't have to operate within this time period that we're trying to provide programming?
So.
That's where I'm confused.
So we will work with each identified organization to identify what their needs are and what their budget timelines are. We won't know that until they apply.
Right.
And with the emphasis on mental wellness and reducing violence, the idea would be is that if everybody knows that in the summer and that
Right.
violence is going to increase, right? So your chances of scoring well enough to get a mini grant this round
Right.
without providing summer programming is probably very
Okay.
minimal.
That's
Yeah.
that's what I was trying to
Yeah.
get at.
Yeah.
Okay. Got
It's
it.
still be taken into account in the scoring process.
Yeah, because we don't
How
want to.
quickly they can spend money.
We don't want to limit, because we don't know what's going to walk in the door, right? Or, you know,
Right.
so we don't ever want
We
to
don't
put
know
in
who's
those
lying.
parameters of this versus that.
Right.
And in fact, we'll probably have 2 cycles running side by side.
That makes sense.
And normally, just so you're aware then, because these grants are going to organizations with very small budgets, we usually grant that money up front so that they don't have to do a reimbursement. Now, we haven't had an internal discussion on is that, you know, at 5,000, it was okay, but at 20,000, we might want to go, here's 10,000, spend that, then here's another 10,000. We haven't had that internal discussion yet.
So one last question.
Yes, ma'am.
And the way that particular motion reads, just so that I'm, let me find it again. So that I'm clear on what you're saying. Because it also has the language going into June of 2024,
Correct.
coupled with the $50,000 that we're adding. That's because we're going to be combining the additional 50,000 to the prospective monies from the city of Toledo.
Correct.
But it's not specifically saying that the $50,000 can be preserved and spent at any time between now and June 30th of 2024. You see what
It doesn't say.
I don't, that's why I got hurt up, so. Yeah, I don't see the point, but if you have a suggestion for how to fix that,
It kind of addresses it when it says fiscal year 2023 health equity project. I mean, it's very specific, and if it's July 1, 2023, it's.
I'm confused.
I am concerned that it's coming from 23 health equity.
It is coming from 23 health
Yeah,
equity
and
funds.
so does the money have to be spent by June 30th, 2023?
Well, don't we?
It would be,
Okay,
that'd be hard to
so-
do.
Yeah, because you're onboarding it.
Especially when
Project
it goes
to
all
use-
summer, June 30th, 2024.
Yep.
You'd almost have to divide it into two motions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you want to preserve the 400,000 for next year and the 200,000 for this
You got
year.
it all in one
Because
motion.
But even then, I mean, even,
Right.
you'd have to spend it by June 2023, which would be virtually impossible
Right.
for these organizations to do.
I think what threw us off is like the intention and the hope is that they use it for summer programming because of the statistics
Right.
that happen over the summer, but it doesn't have to be. They actually have until June 30th of 2024 to.
No,
So
no.
that's what, that's
where I was
therein
reading.
is, that's how I read
See,
it.
that's the concern.
Well, we run 3 cycles through 2024, so we would
Oh.
never approve a grant for $20,000 that
They're not
is
gonna
for
use it a
18
year.
months.
Right.
Yeah, because otherwise, if you presented a budget for an 18-month at 20,000, you wouldn't score high enough competitively to address the issues. So I get what you're saying, but you're not taking into account that we're gonna run 3 cycles with this money.
But at this point, we're only getting a consensus, but, so I don't want to belabor it,
Yeah.
but
I
Well,
can't
you-
make more sense.
So how would you like to clean it up? Because I just soon have it cleaned up so that everybody's aware, because we're not the only ones reading this.
yeah, and that's the other
It's
thing,
the
is there's a little
2024 that's
confusion.
The 2024 throws people off.
Right.
Yeah, so I think if you just put,
You can revise it.
Sorry.
Well, it's okay, it's your motion, so. I-
Maybe just
As
put
long as we
wording
get
into
the
the
outcome,
first
I-
cycle, with the first
Yeah.
cycle, given priority to summer programs, or some, summer fiscal 2023 programs, or something like
Correct.
that, for the very first, I mean, because
it's not
again, you
fiscal.
can't
see
put
why
in the
that matters.
language that's gonna be used by fiscal year 2023, because it won't be. I mean, they're gonna, you're running it all summer, you're running into fiscal 2024. So you can't,
Right.
you can't,
So-
I mean, it wouldn't make sense.
Okay, I see
So
what,
with this
Well,
motion
I don't
is,
think you need the next 2 rounds to be in this motion. I think you only need
Because you
to
got it
account
all
for the
together.
first round,
Right.
the one you're trying to
Well,
do right now.
but the problem with that is that then I come back to you in June and do the same thing, because we don't have a meeting in July.
No,
Right.
we can just separate out and give you the authority now for the next fiscal year, which is what we're doing in the second half of the motion.
In other words, you want to run around that marries $50,000 of our money with $150,000 of ARPA money. And then you're going to have another round with $100,000 of our money, $300,000 of ARPA money for 2 rounds in fiscal '24. Right?
Yes, that's
Yes.
If we could say that in either this motion or 2 motions, I think that would clear it up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You have an idea how to do that?
Off the top of my head.
Well, pretty
What
much
if we
what
did
David
the-
just said.
Pretty much what he just said.
Run it back.
Right, you still run into the issue though with that first motion, because the confusion everybody seems to be having is that the money has to be, but you're saying fiscal 2024 is what's throwing everybody off, but even in that first motion of 50,000, 150,000, they still have to be able to use that money in fiscal year 2024. So it's not really changing language of the motions.
Right.
Well, but it,
Right.
I think.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Because
I just think
essentially
that
what
we
we're
can't-
doing
move
is
forward.
we
Because it's a
are
fiscal year.
approving, moving forward with 50,000, with the $50,000. What we're doing is we're saying, yes, go out and get the RFPs and apply for the grant and to do this. In fiscal year 2024, including that 50,000, is in that 450. So how I read the motion was that it's $450,000 with $50,000 being earmarked already for the summer, so that way the staff has the ability to hit that button and get that money out into the community with the wellness grants, the mental wellness grants. Is that how?
Well, that's what we were planning to do. But I'll be honest with you guys right now, I'm kind of lost in what the issue really is. But I'm happy to try and fix it any way you want to suggest.
I like the idea of two motions.
Two separate motions.
So what we're going to do is we're going to approve the 50 and then 400.
No, 50 and 150.
50 and
For a round of mini, I'm gonna keep calling them mini grants until you make me stop. For a round of mini grants that will be awarded in fiscal '23, but will be spent into fiscal 2024. We don't
There you
know
go.
how long,
There you go.
but we know it
Will be awarded in
will
fiscal
it will be
23.
awarded in '23 and spent in
Perfect.
'23 and '24.
That makes
And
sense.
then we're gonna have.
We'll come back to you in June with another
Yeah,
motion.
and then come back in June with a motion for '24, for two rounds in '24.
Because you've already approved the,
When we approved the
Mental
budget,
wellness
we
and
approved the
community,
$100,000 of our money
Right.
to go with the $300,000 of their money for fiscal '24.
correct.
so all we'll have to do is come back and ask for
Yeah, you just
allocations
ask
of $3
Yeah.
million.
Just to marry it up.
Okay.
It would just, why wouldn't it just read, the second half of that motion would read the same way as all of the other motions, except it wouldn't include the 50,000 in fiscal year 2023. Because it's basically the same thing as your third, fourth, fifth, and sixth motion. So in other words, the second half of the motion would read the same as the other motions. You would simply be removing the additional $50,000 that we're giving now from the motion and give you the authorization to do what you're going to do for the remaining rounds of.
That could be the motion for June, or we could do it today, but you
Right.
still have to have a separate motion
For the 50.
to advance the 50 from another pot and marry it with the 150 that's going to be advanced by ARPA, from ARPA.
So,
You have to approve the transfer of funds.
Yeah.
can we say, approve the transfer of the 50,000 from its fiscal year 2023 health equity project to the mental wellness community grant project? Upon award from the city, allocate 150,000 in ARPA funds to the mental wellness community project to be used. That's what I need to know next.
Well, I would say to be awarded,
To award.
to be awarded in fiscal be but to be completely expended in fiscal '24. To be to be ultimately awarded, ultimately expended, whatever.
Give them the money now.
Because you may want to give $10,000 to 10 people in '23 and then another 10 in a different fiscal year.
You can do
So you've
that.
got to have the ability to bridge that, or to get over that gap.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
To be awarded by June 30th, 2023, and expended before June 2024.
Yeah.
Or if you want to make it more specific, maybe December 31, 23. In other words, you know,
Have it done by the end.
that way you don't have as much overlap with your first round in the next year. Oh, I don't care.
Yeah, I'm fairly confident we won't, but
That
Give
might
yourself
be
the flexibility, that's fine.
yeah. Should we read that again?
Did you write that down?
I did. And by the way, I did write this motion, so I have nobody to blame but myself. The Mental Health Recovery Services Board of Lucas County approves the transfer of $50,000 from its fiscal year 2023 Health Equity Project to the Mental Wellness Community Grant Project. Upon award from the City of Toledo allocates $150,000 in ARPA funds to the Mental Wellness Community Grant Project to be awarded prior to June 30th, 2023 and expended prior to June 30th, 2024, and authorizes its executive director to enter into agreements necessary to implement the project.
Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Those against? Those abstaining? That motion passes.
Whatever it is, right?
All the motions pass,
All the motions pass.
right?
Yeah.
That's right.
Yes.
All the motions pass. Okay.
I'm not even sure I want to go on it. Let's start with, okay, thank you.
Okay.
And we'll bring back the next two cycles in June. But we will model it after that.
Good job, Mr. Arnold.
So, okay, thank you for that. The first thing I want to do is I want to point out the typo in the motion.
Which motion?
Which one are we
Surprised
on?
you didn't catch it.
On the bottom of page 22,
Okay.
Mental Health and Recovery Services Board.
through June 30th, 2003, 203.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes, it's a little typo.
Oh, yes.
We can fix that.
Yeah, so that should be
That's easy.
2023. No, that should be 2023.
2023.
No one caught that.
And we're-
Grammarly didn't catch it, Susie didn't catch it, I didn't catch it.
I
No one.
read it earlier, I just was like, oh.
So here's
That's why
what,
you said it was 2024, and they're like, no, it's 2023. So I'm like, oh, I just assumed it was 20.
so here's the,
Just put it with one of the big.
yeah, here's what's going on with this. So regional funds are that pool of dollars that is actually awarded by the State Department to our region, the 11 boards that make up the 23 county region. However, the region has no ability to actually accept or expend funds. What we do is we collectively get together and we decide by majority vote how funds should be used within the parameters of the rules that Ohio Mass passes down. Then a project lead is elected. So normally if it's a Lucas County project, the Lucas County Board would be the lead. If it's a Hancock County project, the Hancock County Board would be the lead. We have been the lead for several years on the UTMC Youth Acute Care Unit project. We started experiencing issues with that project last fiscal year, and we weren't, early in this fiscal year, we weren't successful in revising the project to our satisfaction, so we've actually been sitting on these funds. When I made the region aware of that, the region decided that they wanted to redistribute $110,000 of the funds that we held to the Surest Path in Hancock County. That money has already been transferred. It's gone. We had $115,000 sitting left for use. We also had $4,050 that were sitting in the pool that was underspent, that Jenny knew about, but the region, it wasn't communicated to the region. So what we're trying to do is kind of clean all this up. In this discussion and through my discussions with the ZEF Center, when they initiated the psychiatric urgent care, what they began to experience is individuals from other counties trying to access the urgent care center. Because it was 100% board funded, Lucas County board funded, funds could not be used to pay for patients from other communities.
Oh,
So either Zeph would serve them and lose money, or bill Medicaid if that was available, or have to say, no, I can't do that. So I presented this to the region to say, let's take this money and allow it to be used so anybody in our region can come and use Zeph's urgent care. And this pool of dollars then would be used to offset those expenses.
That makes sense.
And Zeph Center was in agreement with that, but because it's because we're the lead, I need to come back to you and ask for the allocation now, just like I would have done during the UTMC project. We also want to throw in the extra $4,050 to make that a total of $119,050 to be used through this period of fiscal year. Now, it's highly likely that they won't use all that money, and it can roll over into next year with approval of the region. But we don't have the authorization yet. So you have a motion on the lower half of page 22 to that effect.
So move with the correct changes.
Question.
Do we have a first or?
second?
I moved with the corrected changes.
I
Okay.
second with the corrected changes. Open
Okay.
question.
Question. And just for clarification again, when you say the region includes the 23 county region. That is
Yes.
what we mean. And then the June 30th, what is that?
2023.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
That's the amendment to that.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
If the money is not spent by June 30th, will it tie over to the next year?
We will certainly advocate for that, but that becomes a regional discussion once again. So I think there's 7 or 8 projects, and so underspending goes back into the pool, and then the region decides how to redistribute it, and brings in, if Ohio Mass provides us the additional $1.2 billion, then all that goes into the pool, and then we redistribute it according to the wishes of the collaborative.
Thank you.
If the collaborative would be willing, is there a possibility of this being a allocation they would make on a, annually, so that we're never turning away anyone from other counties? And I mean, I guess I just want to ask that question.
That would be a year-by-year basis,
Okay.
based on available funds. We
Okay.
don't, at this point, we don't even know if the regional mental health and substance use stabilization funds, that's the official word,
Okay.
are even in the state budget for fiscal year '24.
Okay, that's right.
Now, we do know that there is a whole bunch of money coming related to ARPA that could be offset by this, and other things. So that's what everybody's kind of maneuvering towards at this point in time. The same process was used to get the $6 million for the Danny's Place capital.
Okay.
We work very well together as a region. We often offset each other's needs because, especially as the hub that we are, the resource hub that we are, we know that if there isn't a service in Wood County that, the only one who cares about county lines are boards, right? Patients don't care about that. They're just going to drive over the river. And so we try and work out as best we can so that everybody's, what's best for the collective, I guess.
Thank you, Scott.
Any other questions? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining? All right, the motion passes. Scott?
Okay. So, bottom
Spending a lot
of,
of money.
yeah, we are spending a lot of money today.
Yes.
Bottom of page 22, and you have two motions on the bottom of page 23. Yesterday's event was one of the best we've seen. Certainly proud to be a part of that. A lot of positive feedback with both the recognition and particularly the Danny's Place luncheon informational session and fundraiser. We had $153,000 in pledges at the fundraiser itself. Surprised by Mr. Stengel's family, didn't tell anybody and walked in the door with a $10,000 pledge. So that's fantastic. The Hex and 33 Forever Foundation pledged $133,000. And then a gentleman named
Green Linden?
Breen
No,
Linden,
Leiden.
local gentleman, pledged $10,000. I'm starting with that discussion because the original $500,000 that you've allocated towards this project, of that, 400,000 of it is essentially gone now. It's spent. Now, most of that is able to be reimbursed once these other funding sources get approved, right? And then we allocate it. But we're at a place now where we have $100,000 sitting there for in our designated fund balance or designated for Danny's Place. But we have a substantial amount of activity that still needs to be completed. We have only funded our architect and engineer for $100,000, and they've expended all that money. They are waiting for approval to begin work on completing the design phase. And also, we are hopeful that either late this week or early next week, we will put out the RFQ for a construction manager. My concern is that we have all this momentum and little money to allocate. So what I'm proposing in the motions is that we essentially give ourselves a loan to keep the project moving. So we award $683,000 to NAC to continue to provide design development services, furniture, fixture, equipment, and artwork consultation, and site rezoning activities. Those last two items were not included in their bid, so they're additional dollars. And there are additional dollars to the amount of, I think, $54,000. And then you authorize me to enter into contract for those purposes. That will assure that we keep the project moving forward. If our goal is shovels in the ground November 1st, we need to keep things moving. If
Scott, you said 683, the motion says 638.
Sorry, that's my dyslexia, 638. Thank
Okay,
you.
I didn't know.
Thank you.
Either one's fine, I just didn't know which one was right.
No, it's 638,
Okay.
thank you. So that's the first part of that. Keep things moving. Because if we slow down, or if we wait for the state to do the zoning, we will not hit our mark of November. We know that for a fact. the other thing that's factored in is we don't have a meeting in July. So we're trying to prep ourselves to keep this moving through July by providing the flexibility of increased funding. I need to make one correction already. I said $100,000 sitting there, there's actually only 80, so we've spent 420. Sorry for that misstatement. So the next motion is essentially approving the $80,000 that was previously designated or restricted and putting that into the miscellaneous line is what we've been calling it, and adding $320,000 with the anticipation of early construction management services and site and project feasibility services, and then authorizing me to enter into the contract, which would be kind of like what we're doing with the architect and engineer. We would do an initial contract for construction management, but also keep those other things moving in the project site feasibility services moving forward. And again, all of this is reimbursable by any of the other funds that we have, any of them. Most of it is built into the Marcy Chapter $2 million because we wanted to spend the federal money first. But we have the flexibility to take it out of the Ohio Mosque Community Capital, any of the ARPA funds, any of these things that we would be able to do. So in the end, your original investment of $500 will be expended, but the dollars here very likely won't ever even touch our money. It'll be allocated to something else. But I need that approval now, so I need the dollars now. And remember I said, remember how you do this initial application, and then you get this preliminary pledge or approval, and then you've got to do all these additional paperwork. Well, that's the same with each and every one of these dollar amounts. So that's why I wanted you to recall that. Because, yes, we have the money. It's sitting there waiting for us. We just have to dot all the i's and cross all the t's. So I'm happy to answer any of the questions that you have related to this. And maybe you all want to make some comments related to Danny's place, the fundraiser, if you so
It was
desire.
very nice, very well attended.
It was. I received a lot of positive feedback yesterday afternoon afterwards, and even this morning, some phone calls, people calling, and even Nima and I were talking. One of the comments that was brought up quite a few times is that people left with a heavy heart.
Mm-hmm.
Like the community really didn't realize that someone coming out of the psychiatric hospital after 3 days could be dropped off at a shelter. I mean, there were some really poignant points that were made that were just heart-wrenching. And, you know, our own Felisa and Erica shared their personal stories. And I think that made all the difference in the world, and I just want to recognize these two incredible women for their bravery and their courage to get up and speak publicly about something so personal and heart-wrenching for you as mothers. I mean, it touched everybody in the room. And it was exciting. To have our own Jim Stingel step up to the plate the way that he did. That was just a highlight. And everybody's comments were really pretty much spot on and whatnot. We got great press talking about it, and it was really nice for us to have that coverage.
I was impressed with the story that was told. You just can't imagine what her parents had to experience. And they had the courage to step up and do something about it. They didn't just sit there silently, but they created this monument to their daughter, Danny's place. And I just think that's very encouraging.
And it was well attended by the trustees and board staff. So
Yes.
thank you for all the effort. It was a long day yesterday for all of you. Exciting day, but thank you very much for your
Well,
presence.
We ate all day.
You know what, I would be
The
remiss
chicken
if I
was a little
didn't.
dry, though.
That has been the feedback.
The vegetarian mushrooms were spot on, just saying, they were delicious. Michael and Faith, I want to express my deep gratitude because you two really did a lot of the heavy lifting to make it yesterday as smooth. And everybody knew what they were doing and where they needed to be, so thank you.
You still need a motion in a second.
Is a motion?
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
I have, I think the question, or maybe just a comment, the $80,000 that's left from the original, I would not expect that to be reimbursed. I mean, I think, isn't that our contribution, isn't that our?
It will eventually be our comp, yeah, it's
Yeah.
part of our first 500.
Okay, I just,
Yeah.
so to me, that's a separate bucket of money.
So, yeah, it's however we create the pool, right? Because
Yeah.
that's what we need. We need
Yeah, I mean,
swing funds.
I don't want to leave money on the table,
Yeah.
but I don't think there should be an expectation that 80,000 is going to get reimbursed from other sources. Those other sources are going to go to construction, and we've made our contribution at 500.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is the 638, is it just consulting on furniture, fixtures, equipment, and art?
No, it's to
Is it
finish,
actually
it's,
buying the stuff?
no, it's just, it's only $28,000 for furniture, fixtures, equipment, and artwork consulting. It's $26,000 for zoning. The remainder of it is the architect and engineering fees, all the design, all the, you know, architect, building, you know, the stuff that the construction manager would take and then create specs and bids for. It's part of what they did, it's related to their bid. So all of that information, and I can tell you a little bit more.
So
How's
the
this?
majority of
Hold on.
those dollars are going to provide design development services.
So let me tell you what their original bid was, because I anticipated that question. Their original bid was $663. It's the cost of architectural and engineering fees, which will cover the following: structural, civil, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, technology, engineering, design documents, construction bid documents, plans and specifications, assistance during construction bidding, answers to contractors' questions, construction administration, construction oversight, submittal fee or review, and responses to question and coordination.
So that design is just like a preliminary, it's not.
That's phase one.
So it's not
You can't build off of that design. You need blueprints, you
Sure.
need, you know.
Well, yeah.
Yes, yeah, and so that's the next phase.
Okay.
Right. We entered the first phase specifically to get through the Danny's Place fundraiser on May 1st. And we got all of this work, plus a little head start on some of the other stuff. But now they're stopped. They've spent all their money. And so they're like, you need to replenish the pool.
And the rezoning activities, does that actually pay for rezoning, or is that just like some?
It's an irritation is what it is. Because we should technically not be responsible for rezoning the state's property. It's theirs. But they have to they have to submit a master plan review. And we've been told that if we want this to happen and put shovels in the ground by November 1st, we better lead it. Because they have all these other things going on. So we have a choice to make. Do it or not do it. Do it and hit our time frame, or not do it and wait for them, which could put us off. Now, the good news is all those fees actually go to their grant anyway. So they're essentially paying for it, they're just using a different bucket. Yeah, we're not happy about that.
So you're still going to go through the city council process?
We will have to go through the zoning process, but it's a much easier process because it's institutional campus.
Okay.
And so we won't have to go, and it just requires a submission of a master plan and then a minor site revision, which
You don't need
zoning
a
and planning,
special
right,
use permit.
don't need a special use permit, right, which makes things so much easier.
All right, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining? All right, so the motion passes.
Okay, quickly, page 24, you've seen this 100 times. Health officer designation, we have 1 new one and 5 renewals. And just making sure I have a quorum before everybody walks out the door. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I think someone's just going to the bathroom.
Yeah, we still can't vote.
Oh, yeah, right.
We have a quorum.
Once established, a quorum continues and still, unless somebody suggests the absence of a quorum.
Didn't I just do that?
Don't do it again. I have a
Just keep that in the back of your head.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we do have one anyway. So you see this 100 times. You have 5 renewals and 1 new designation.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? Those abstaining? Motion passes. All right, open session. All right, Richard?
Very briefly, the Charter Revision Committee, this is the mayor's committee that looks at making changes to the city charter. They did meet on April the 20th. They did not have a quorum. They had some people attending by Zoom, which meant they could not vote, but they are going ahead with a ballot measure to be placed next year that would limit city council from 12 members to 9. Actually, it's never been 9. It used to be 8 and the mayor was a tiebreaker. Their sales pitch to the public is we have lost so much population, we no longer need 12 city council members, and city council will spend more time on neighborhoods than on social issues that affect the entire country, and so people in Toledo don't care about. My concern is next year, presidential election year, got a lot of angry voters showing up, probably big historic turnout. This board actually has a 0.5 and 11 measure. People will see, people who don't like city council will see this as an opportunity to stick it to city council. Not necessarily they think this will make it better, but people may think 9 is better than 12 and it would require there to be public hearings and stuff like that, but they have until August of next year to get this on the ballot. As we speak, well, city council, they will spend $171,000 to a new vendor. It's called Superior Uniform Sales Incorporated for the body armor. If you look at today's USA Today, you'll see the importance of this. In Philadelphia, they had a barricaded man shoot at police. They were protected by their body armor. Officer in St. Louis, Missouri was not so lucky. He was checking up on a mentally ill man. He was shot and wounded. So I do not know if this is the lowest bid or if this is the best product. I'm going to try and find out, but it's important we protect our police officers. They will once again, on May 23rd at 4 p.m., have a safety committee meeting. Now, they've been criticized for not having these because they get a lot of angry people showing up. It just says biannual crime reduction report. I guess the new chief will give them some statistics, tell them what's going on, city council ask questions, and then there will be an opportunity for the community to comment. I should think there would be some people there. That's going to be following their agenda review May 23rd. And if anybody cares, that the contract that Lucas County has with Aramat for the jail food, it's expiring, and there has been some problems in the past. So they will advertise, and Tina Skeleton Wozniak wants to make sure that they serve more apples and fresh fruit and healthy choices. And Pete Durkin assures us that the county commissioners will continue their annual trek to the jail so they can sample the food. That's what's going on in Windover.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else for open session? All right, then, meeting adjourned.
Thank you, everyone. Let me kill the mic.
No, I currently work in